unplug is one way. Getting proper sleep is another. So remember, we want to give our body a chance to recharge that battery. So making sure you get your 8 hours of sleep a night and regular amounts of sleep will also help ensure that you can get a chance to recharge that battery to its fullest. However, there are some other tactics that we can do throughout the day to help manage our stress and try to recover and prevent burnout. And we can do this by understanding how the biology of stress itself works. So the first aspect of stress is known as the HPA axis, or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And when we are stressed, our body releases a cascade of hormones. It begins in our brain when we identify a stressful situation, either consciously or unconsciously. And our brain releases a hormone from the hypothalamus called corticotropin releasing hormone. And that CRH is received by something called the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland acknowledges CRH when you're stressed, and in itself, as a response, releases something called adrenocorticotropic hormone, or also known as ACTH. ACTH travels from our pituitary gland through our bloodstream to our adrenal gland, which is located above our kidneys. And our kidneys are the adrenal gland above our kidneys is what releases cortisol, which is what's the stress hormone many of us are familiar with. It's one of the most major stress hormones in animals and as well as humans. So that's why, so cortisol works in a release response to stress. It also works in a diurnal or daily pattern where it cycles up and down. And that cycle can be interrupted if you're not sleeping appropriately. So that's why sleep is one of the important things to make sure you maintain a regular sleep schedule so that cortisol level is following its regular patterns. Cortisol has more impact though than just kind of floating around in your body. Cortisol actually impacts throughout your body, throughout the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is broken up into two subsystems, one known as the parasympathetic system, the PNS, and one called the sympathetic system, also known as the SNS. And the parasympathetic and sympathetic system are innervated through organs all throughout your body, and they have complementary functions. So the sympathetic nervous system is responsible for activity to get up and go, also what we know as fight or flight. So for example, it'll dilate our pupils, increase our heart rate, increase our breathing to try to get more oxygen in our body to respond to a potential threat. The parasympathetic system is also known as kind of doing things related to resting and digesting, and complements the sympathetic system for opposite reactions like slowing down your heartbeat, slowing down your breathing, and things to do with helping recover and maybe prevent overactivating that. Now, when we are stressed or not stressed, both of these systems are always active, and it's the balance between the two that allows us to respond appropriately when we need to. So when we do need to respond to something stressful, we want the sympathetic system to be a little bit more engaged so we can deal with it. But we also want the sympathetic system to kind of relax and the parasympathetic system to activate instead when we are relaxed, to help recover from that activity when we no longer need to respond to the stressful situation. However, when we are extremely stressed for a very long amount of time, the sympathetic system, the fight or flight system, is activated too much, and that's what leads to unregulated amounts of cortisol in our body, leads to overactivation and other physical issues. So if we are wanting to de-stress or prevent stress, we need to find a way to activate our parasympathetic system more. But how do we do that? One method to do that is by what I like to refer to as hacking into our parasympathetic nervous system. One interesting nerve in our body is the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is interesting because it is attached to the heart, the lungs, liver, a number of organs that are also related to our parasympathetic system. So if we can activate the vagus nerve, we could activate the parasympathetic system. And one way to do that is through controlled breathing. As you can see, the vagus nerve is connected to the lungs. So what kind of controlled breathing am I talking about? I mean, I just talking about breathing because I'm breathing right now, right? But it's actually a very specific type of breathing. So In our lab, we study a technique called the one breath reset. And it's meant to help quickly activate your parasympathetic nervous system through the vagus nerve and modulate the amount of stress and arousal we're experiencing. So in order to do this, you want to begin by grounding yourself wherever you're standing or sitting, and you want to exhale fully first. And when you want to exhale, you want to inhale deeply, but keeping your shoulders down and relaxed. You're going to hold that breath very briefly. Once you hold the breath a little briefly, you want to exhale slowly through pursed lips to help exaggerate the length of time you're going to exhale, and letting your weight slowly drop to the ground and push that breath through the core. And then you return to breathing normally. And if it doesn't work, you can try to repeat it every couple minutes, and try to help manually override your heart rate and through this breathing and bring your stress levels down a little bit. Does this work? So here's some actual lab data from my lab with the heart rate monitors that we use that can actually measure heart rate from second to second. And this is an example of a doctor attending to a person in crisis. And you can see that his heart rate actually spikes to above 180 beats per minute when he has to attend to the person. But he immediately engages through practice, through repeated practice over time, is able to immediately engage with his one breath reset, and we can see that heart rate drop back down again. So that is showing how this heart rate can how quickly this can have effect. And you can see this time period is only across 2 minutes. So this technique is pretty good for bringing back your heart rate to a more manageable level, like right before a test or right before giving a speech. But what are some things we could do maybe more maintenance level? So the other aspect I'm going to discuss today, and the last one I'm going to discuss, has to do with your intestinal health or your gut health. And your gut has a surprisingly large impact on stress, more than we might think. So your gut microbiome, or the various bacteria, you might have heard of healthy gut bacteria before, significantly influences a number of things related to metabolism, your immunity, as well as your behavior. When you are extremely stressed, it actually reduces the permeability of the tissue of the gut, allowing various bacteria or antigens to go across that barrier and triggering your immune response. And by triggering your immune response, it in turn activates your HPA axis that we talked about already, that endocrine hormonal side of it, as well as your sympathetic nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, your fight or flight response, because your body's immune system has to engage. It acknowledges it as a stressful situation that your body needs to respond to. So it unnecessarily increases the rate of triggering those stressful responses and the possible effects that come with it. So if anyone has irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, you might have noticed that when you are particularly stressed, your symptoms of IBS increases, and you might have worse cramps, you might have more sickness during those times. And that is one of the reasons, because stress is deeply interconnected with our gut. So how can we work with this? How can we hack our gut? So in order to hack our gut, we must try, we can do a number of things. We want to basically improve our gut microbiome. And one thing we can do is avoiding highly processed food. Another thing we can do is improve our gut microbiome by eating by eating more probiotics, as well as making sure we have a good variety of fruits and vegetables, because that promotes a healthy gut bacteria and has been shown to have positive effect on our body as far as reducing symptoms of depression, improving immunity, reducing levels of stress, and reducing levels of inflammatory cytokines, which are important for that, which are part of that inflammatory immune response. So reduces overactivation of those aspects. Another way, besides eating fruits and vegetables and trying to keep a low amount of processed food from entering our body, is also being around things that can improve our gut microbiome and increasing that good gut bacteria. And one way we can do this is through exposure to animals as well as plants. And as an individual who has been home for a while, I don't know about you guys, but I have started adopting more plants. And I've also been making use a lot of my family's dog because she is very cuddly and has great properties. So plants and animals help increase that gut microbiome. And also being around cute, cuddly, furry things also reduces stress and has been shown that experience of that reduces the symptoms of stress. It actually reduces your physiological stress and thus preventing burnout, preventing the mental health and cardiovascular systems.